My usual kind of modus operandi for the channel is to report the news and not try to make it. But if you've been recently on Twitter, there was this great sudden upsurge of interest in Rise of Skywalker and Rogue One. Now, I'm not going to hide my preferences. I really supported the Rogue One trending and tweeted a lot of those things. I did tweet a lot of Rise of Skywalker, but if you're familiar with some of the videos, I've been mainly critical of Rise of Skywalker. Again, a lot of it is not necessarily due to the film itself, but it's politics of production, the way Bob Iger wanted certain things done, and we don't know how much JJ agreed with it, but I think the end product is a pretty compromised film. But with Rogue One, I'm much more enthusiastic, and I can kind of see why after a while, it's finally getting a lot of the embrace and love it deserves. So I'm just going to do a quick rundown, I think, where we stand critically, and then get into the films themselves. And why I do think fans should support both, but I think Rise of Skywalker still needs this major qualification. Okay, in terms of positive and negative, probably one of the best positive assessments is by Major Lee, and I'm going to do a reaction video, but I think Lee does a pretty good, fair-minded job of going through what's good in Rise of Skywalker, and he makes a lot of concessions, and I think for the most part he makes really good points. Now, in terms of negative assessments, there are so many to walk through, but I want to single out Will, who I think does a pretty good job of being fairly scathing, but he doesn't go overboard in his video. He does make the thesis that it's the only bad Star Wars film. I think that's a little questionable, but I think he does a really good job of going through the critical problems in Rise of Skywalker. Okay, that's a survey of the critics. Now let's get to the fans themselves. Now, it seems kind of weird why these two films in particular are trending together. I mean, it wasn't just them. There was kind of like a lifting of all boats. There was a lot of love for the prequels and even The Last Jedi, which is kind of ironic because of Rise of Skywalker was basically dedicated to negating a lot of it, but there we are. Now, with Rogue One, I think I can speak with a lot of confidence why it deserves and has gotten a lot of love. It's a pretty good, solid story. It makes sense coherently from beginning to end. Jin's story is a little derivative, doing the same father-child story and how you have to make up for the sins of your father, that kind of thing. But overall, the actors and the characters are done pretty well. The droid, K, is really excellent. I really love Alan Tudyk. There's a lot of smart little references to Firefly, and they're not overdone. It stays strictly within the parameters of the war genre, and it's very gritty. I mean, it's very, very bloody towards the end, so they had the courage to be consistent throughout the whole film. It just looks spectacular. I know a lot of people criticize it for being a little bit too much nostalgia, especially with the Darth Vader moment at the end. But I think overall it was pretty well handled, and it didn't go overboard too much one way or the other with nostalgia. So there's a lot of good stuff. And of course the bad stuff is there too, of course, the bad jokes. The cinematography is too dark for no reason. I thought they could have made some scenes a little bit more brighter. It wouldn't have ruined the movie. They could have, done things a little bit more experimentally, like Last Jedi. But again, it is what it is. It's a sort of a safe spin-off film. You can see it in many different ways. It can plug up a big plot hole with the Death Star. But overall, you can just sort of get into it without getting into the bigger saga, so it's sort of a nice little standalone film. Now, Rise of Skywalker, again, I don't want to in any way deny it has a lot of great moments. There's a lot of great Luke, there's a lot of great Han, 3CPO has a great adventure story, the cinematography looks amazing, there's some good action scenes, Palpatine is very impressive when he comes back, and so on and so forth. And then there's the redemption story with Ben, but again, the bad stuff, I think, really outweighs it by far, right? This story as a whole, to me, never made any real sense. The plot has so many contradictions and so many plot holes. The editing is chopping. The jokes are good in some places, but in most places they're bad. It's good that he introduced a ton of new characters, and they are given a little bit of time, but we're not given too much focus on the new characters, and that's disappointing. And overall, it just didn't feel like it really ended the saga, much less the trilogy, in any deep or satisfying way. And then, of course, there's the politics of it, right? Taking out Rose, pretty clearly insulting Ryan at certain points, negating a lot of The Last Jedi for no reason. And then there's just stuff that just is just beyond silly, having the red stormtroopers, sort of showing the Knights of Ren to sort of sell things, but not doing anything with them, and so on and so forth. So from a marketing as well as story standpoint, it feels very, very compromised. But that said, if we can push those things aside, I don't think it's a genuinely bad film. I just think it's below average. I mean, I gave it the grade of 6 out of 10, which seems devastating, but again, that's measured against all film. I mean, there's a lot of films that go far, far below that. So it's not Batman and Robin, it's not Showgirls, it's not Sharknado, it's not Battlefield Earth. I don't want to say that, but I think for a Star Wars film, it was just very disappointing to me. But if people can see a lot of the better moments and really emphasize those, the Ben Ray relationship, right? Ben with Han and Luke with Ray and things like that. And there's this great little moment where Chewbacca hugs Rose. There's a lot of great little moments like that. But I just felt overall it just never came together. And at least with Rogue One, I understand it is a big budget Hollywood film. It's mass marketed. It has compromises and things like that. I mean, a lot of things people give Gareth Edwards credit for are not really his. Tony Gilroy came in and did a lot of the reshooting and things like that. So it is also very compromised. But I think at the end of the day, it's much more coherent. And you can really see Gareth Edwards' style in most of the film, if not the whole thing. So it's a bit of a mixed picture, but I think in terms of fan enthusiasm, there's nothing wrong with praising both. I guess my only problem is with Rise of Skywalker, there are so many kind of production and political issues behind the scenes. I don't think we want to just mythologize and say, well, let's just enjoy the film without those. I mean, those are in the film. I mean, they literally have a lesbian moment. They also cut out Rose. Right, they're just doing a lot of things, clearly marketing towards different groups. They have a lot of OT moments, just the thing with Chewbacca and the medal. So it's really hard to separate the politics of production because that's in the film. They're really literally marketing it to certain segments of the fandom. And I never felt that with Rogue One. There's a lot of little moments about the prequels, a lot of little moments of the original trilogy, and of course the sequel trilogy. It's not really partisan in that way. I don't think a fan would be offended watching Rogue One. Whereas with Rise of Skywalker, you've got to sort of take a side. If you're going to like the story, you're going to have to get rid of certain parts of the other saga. And that just seemed needlessly confrontational, at least in my humble opinion. All right, this has been an assessment of fans uniting over Rogue One and Rise of Skywalker. Star Wars Analyzed. If you like the content, please hit the like button and/or subscribe. Please leave a comment below. Please consider supporting the work on Patreon. I know I'm taking a long time to get to do that, but I will get to it. Thank you for listening. Please be safe.